Today's reading comes from Forest Church and it's called Cathedral of the World. Imagine awakening one morning from a deep and dreamless sleep to find yourself in the nave of a vast cathedral. This cathedral is as ancient as humankind. The builders have worked from time immemorial, destroying and creating, confounding and perfecting, tearing down and raising up arches in this cathedral, buttresses and chapels, organs and theatres, chancels and transepts, gargoyles, idols and icons. Not a moment passes without work being begun that shall not be finished in the lifetime of the architects who planned it, the patrons who paid for it, the builders who constructed, or the expected worshippers. Welcome to the Cathedral of the World. Above all else, contemplate the windows. In the Cathedral of the World, there are windows without number. Each window tells a story about the creation of the world, the meaning of history, the purpose of life, the nature of humankind, the mystery of death. The windows of the cathedral are where the light shines through. Because the cathedral is so vast, our time so short, and our vision so dim, over the course of our pilgrimage, we are able to contemplate only a tiny part of the cathedral, explore a few absences, reflect upon the play of darkness and light through a few of its windows. A 21st century theology based on the concept of one light and many windows offers its adherents both breadth and focus. Honoring multiple religious approaches, it only excludes the truth claims of absolutists. That is because fundamentalists claim that the light shines through their window only. Skeptics draw the opposite conclusion. Seeing the bewildering variety of windows and observing the folly of the worshippers, they conclude there is no light. But the windows are not the light. They are where the light shines through. We shall never see the light directly, only as refracted through the windows of the cathedral. Prompting humility, life's mystery lies hidden. The light is veiled. Yet being halfway inside between the creation itself and our body's smallest constituent part, that we can encompass with our minds the universe that encompasses us is a cause of great wonder. Awakened by the light, we stand in the cathedral, trembling with awe. Here ends the reading.
Everything is holy now. It used to be a world out there. Heaven sending rain hand-me-downs. Now I'm walking with the reverent air. 'Cause everything is holy now. 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 Everything is holy now.
In the summer of 1990, I visited Paris to visit a really dear friend who lived right near the beautiful Basilica of Sacré-Cœur, the Sacred Heart. Often I would climb the steep stone staircase behind Jeannie's flat up to Montmartre and slip into that great church and sit quietly in the back. If you've ever been to Sacré-Cœur, you know that the central image above the altar is a fairly unusual one for European basilicas and cathedrals because it shows a living Jesus. It's sort of a teaching or blessing pose, hovering in a billowing white robe, and his arms are like this, rather than the crucified Christ that you usually see in that position. It's a really peaceful, inviting image. One day, Jeannie, who's a lapsed Catholic, decided to go with me up to soccer court, and we went in back, just kind of soaking up the vibe, as they say. And then we kind of glanced at each other in this way that friends can do, where you don't need to say anything, you just have this shared understanding. And we walked quietly together up the aisle, pulling scarves over our bare shoulders, as one is expected to do in all European churches. Not really supposed to, and actually most houses of worship, not supposed to have bare shoulders. We sat there in the front pew, thinking our thoughts or our prayers, praying our prayers, when a security guard approached Jeannie, because she was sitting on the outside, and he tapped her on the arm and whispered to her in French. And she whispered back, also in French. And I couldn't really catch what they were saying, also because I don't speak French that well, but I could tell it wasn't friendly. I tried to hold my peace in the stillness of the place, but their hushed conversation became more of, obviously, an argument. And finally, Jeannie took me by the arm, and she whispered, "Come on." And we left the cathedral, or the basilica. And that is how I got thrown out of soccer court for not genuflecting. Now, you all know what genuflecting is? It's, okay, can somebody who grew up with that tradition demonstrate it? Yeah, Francine.
So before you go into the aisle, this is the pew.
So if you didn't hear that, I almost feel like I shouldn't do it. It's not my tradition. But the kind of the courtesy and the crossing the self before you enter the pew. I'm pretty sure, I still don't know how to genuflect, as I've been in many Protestant, Orthodox, and Catholic churches, basilicas, and cathedrals since then, and no one has required it. I've actually been back to sacre coeur itself and not genuflected, and no one complained. I think that guy just had control issues. And it's a shame because, that's the kind of thing that can actually make someone feel unwelcome in a house of worship, to be asked to leave. We teach a curriculum here at UUCGL and Unitarian Universalist congregations called Our Neighboring Faiths. It's a curriculum for 7th or 8th graders. I may have actually taken it myself when I was a young UU. What it's about is our kids go and visit houses of worship of various faith traditions. So here, locally, they go to a Muslim community, Jewish synagogue, Protestant churches, Catholic churches. I think they visit the Spiritualist temple across from the library, next to the library, which actually used to be our Universalist chapel in Swampscott. And part of that process exposes them to different communities and helps them to learn how to be respectful visitors in those diverse contexts. Respect and decorum are central to developing cultural competency, and I definitely support that. We don't need to share the beliefs of a spiritual tradition in order to be good guests. And to clearly state my opinion on the matter of genuflecting, sitting, standing, making signs, or participating in rituals in houses of worship, they are tricky, and they invite thought and a bit of research and a bit of discernment. Maybe talking about it with a clergy person in the house, in place you might be visiting, or definitely reading materials provided in the foyer that helpfully explain things. Those are all very helpful in navigating the unknown. In all situations, however, it's fine to remain where one is, not to participate or to make symbols or signs that are not part of one's own tradition. And it's fine to nod respectfully and to decline to participate in any collective action. Hands crossed over one's chest is generally understood in many houses of worship to mean, thank you, but I'm all set. Or, I'll have a blessing. It's complicated because there are all sorts of expectations, and I don't want to violate them either. I also don't want to be thrown out for not doing them. As a religious and spiritual explorer, I have many stories of being an awkward visitor and committing faux pas, such as the time I was trying to help clean up after a Sabbath dinner at the Chabad Lubavitcher House in Evanston, Illinois. And I desecrated the purity of their kosher kitchen by scraping meat and dairy into the sink together. That is not okay. They keep separate sinks for dairy and meat. The horror of having done that lives with me to this day. But so does the extraordinary grace expressed by Rabbi Dov as he turned to me, cowering in the corner during the subsequent tumult, and he said so nicely and really genuinely, "The point is, you were trying to help, and that's what matters to God." Never have forgotten that. It is no surprise that many people choose to avoid these excruciating social collisions by avoiding organized religion altogether and seeking the holy presence alone, or in nature, or at home, in the safety of one's kinship circle with private rituals and traditions. Those are beautiful ways to cultivate a sense of what is sacred, but the human project of trying to find and create meaning in the midst of being alive, with all its wild plot twists, uncertainties, and demands, is one that is best attempted in communities of encounter and inquiry. For those who appreciated the cathedral of the world concept eloquently articulated by the late Unitarian Universalist minister Forrest Church, and read so beautifully just now by Amanda, all religions and spiritual philosophies have insights into the holy, that which is worth revering. But it is actually not accurate to say that all religions teach the same thing. They actually don't really, not even at their most foundational core. They actually teach very different things and conflicting things. My biggest personal objection to this sentiment is that none of us has permission to reduce any religious tradition in this manner. Not Muslim, not Jew, not Sikh, not Unitarian Universalist, nor non-adherent to any of these traditions, who has fairly casually observed and studied them, has the authority to claim that they all teach the same thing. This point matters mostly to me, or most to me, because stating that all religions teach the same thing is too casual and easy a reduction of something so serious. And I press the point because Unitarian Universalism had a very arrogant, well-meant but arrogant era, during which it tried to position or imagine itself as a new world religion that was the best distillation, perhaps the most humanitarian and humanistic impulse of all the major world religions. And while this sounded like a worthy and great identity to aspire to, the problem with it is that it relied on shallow and entirely unauthorized interpretation and borrowing from wherever it liked. A Sufi quote here, taken out of context. An interpretation of a Muslim or Jewish scripture without the benefit of consultation or deep scholarship with any Muslims or Jews. Translations of Arabic or Navajo by white guys and women. You see the problem with this. We have learned a lot in subsequent decades. We have learned to be more respectful. We have learned to consult with scholars of the various traditions. And our hymnal, which has not been updated since the 1980s, is still full, unfortunately, of misattributed and mistranslated quotes from various traditions. But we have resources now, and so if we choose to use them, we can explain and give context better than when this came out. So we evolve. Cultures and the specificity of traditions are, to say the least, complicated and deserving of careful, respectful treatment. And while some of us may find the study of religion interesting, others don't. And that's okay. But they wonder how to develop a spiritual life in a way that is not quite so fraught. If all the world religions don't teach exactly the same thing, even as they encourage and promote many similar values and practices, what's the bottom line for a diverse collection of souls such as ours, gathered from among a wide spectrum of personal philosophies, theologies, spiritual traditions, here on the North Shore? If I may venture a response to that, what's our bottom line? I would say the foundational purpose of our gathering today and all of our Sundays, of our programs, our service, our spiritual practice teaching, even our meetings, our business meetings, yes, our faith development programs, our mission, our music program, our architecture, and our properties, is to cultivate reverence. This means we are constantly reorienting through all of those ways that we gather and learn and grow. We are constantly reorienting our perspective and our perceptions to seek beauty and blessedness. All of those places and wherever we are. We don't romanticize reality and avoid hard truths, but we remain attentive. This is what cultivating reverence means. It means to remain attentive to renewing and creative forces and energies that are working through all of creation, including human beings, that generate gratitude, hope, awe, joy. Paul Woodruff is the author of a little book called Reverence, Renewing a Forgotten Virtue. And he suggests that reverence doesn't belong to religion so much as it belongs to community. Very interesting take. Reverence, he writes, lies behind civility and all of the graces that make life in society bearable and pleasant. We're reverent, he says, when we have a capacity to hold awe for what we believe lies outside, rather, our control. Whether it's God or truth, justice, nature, even death. His emphasis on responding with deep respect to that which lies beyond our control appeals to me because it corresponds so closely to the most unappreciated virtue of humility. A word with an etymology that goes all the way back to humus, earth. Stay earthy. Ultimately, the reverent person and community is gifted with perspective. They maintain this awareness that they exist in an environment within which they're not the only important part. They're not always the main character. Outward forms and rituals, such as lighting candles in ceremonial ways, processing as graduates wearing mortarboards, rising for the Pledge of Allegiance, carrying a casket out of a church. All of these are meant to create an atmosphere of shared reverence, and they are always worth considering deeply. What is it we are being prompted in these rituals to hold in the highest regard? Do we consent to that? And if we follow the promptings of conscience and decline to participate, how might we respond to those who accuse us of irreverence? I have been so accused, and one response that I've used is to simply say, we don't worship the same things. And it's okay with me if you think I'm irreverent. I'm all right with that. I know who I am. Some rituals are meant to engender awe and deep feeling in its participants, or some rituals that are meant to engender awe and deep feeling in its participants are spiritually dangerous, enforcing conformity, establishing oppressive hierarchies, and communicating inclusion and exclusion. We know these manipulations when we see them, even if we are unable to articulate in the moment what feels so wrong about them. What is wrong most of the time is that they do not, as civil rights leader Howard Thurman said, communicate a spiritual reality that both represents and leads us to love. That's a good discerning tool. Does this ritual represent a reality that leads me to love? If not, I might not want to participate in it. 10 years ago, I was in New York City, participating in one of the most holy rituals for me, which is that I was seeing a bunch of Broadway shows. Really is a holy place for me, the theater. On Patriots Day, I put on my Boston Red Sox cap, because I'm an agitator, and I visited some museums in New York City, and I explored it, and I don't really recall, because I think I probably checked in on my phone to see how the marathon was going. But then in the late afternoon, I noticed, I was walking down the street near Gramercy Park, and I noticed that New Yorkers were crowded into bars and pubs, and that televisions were on. And it's the kind of thing you see like during the World Cup finale, you know, that's the only time I've seen crowds like that. And I thought, I know the Boston Marathon is really big news at home, but I wonder what all these New Yorkers are so interested in. And so I ducked into a pub around, and I saw that it was indeed the Boston Marathon that was collecting all of these New Yorkers together, but for terrible reasons. I stood in shock watching the coverage with them as we all took in this scene of chaos. And I realized as I was watching, I was feeling hands on my arms. You from Boston? Yeah, I am. My shoulders were gently squeezed by I don't know how many hands. That's on the back, hey Boston. You okay? Remember that usually a Boston Red Sox cap in New York City is an open declaration of hostilities. Someone jostled through the crowd with me to find me a space at the actual bar and get it cleared away. And then the drinks started coming. A lot of Sam Adams. They didn't know what's. Pour one out for Boston. And I'm like drinking a beer and I'm passing along beers and sharing them and cocktails. I don't know how long I was there. I didn't feel anymore like an individual person. I just melted in with this crowd in this ritual of witnessing, grieving, raging, and compassion. New Yorkers know about terrorist bombings. Too many people in too many places know about this kind of violence. My Amtrak train home was canceled, and so I stayed in the care of New Yorkers until I could return back to Boston. I don't remember, it was like a day or two later, and they opened up the trail lines. And yes, I remember that time, as perhaps you also do, as confronting me both with the worst of human nature and the best of human nature. Sometimes we get kicked out of the holy place. Sometimes we get pulled into it. I think we know who we want to be in that scenario. Pullers in and the pulled. May we journey on with gratitude, seeking the beauty and the blessedness that gives life meaning and wonder, and making holy places wherever those things are to be found. Peace be upon those who died that day, and peace and healing and strength upon all of those who were harmed that day, in body, in mind, and in spirit.